stand on the black sand coast of southern Iceland and look north. The glaciers of 𝐒𝐻𝐺 sit on the horizon like they have for centuries, vast and immovable. But walk to the riverbed at their feet, and something is wrong. The channel that should run wide and milky turquoise in midsummer is half the width it was a decade ago, and the gravel on its banks is dry. That dry riverbed at the foot of 𝐒𝐻𝐺 is not an accident of one dry summer. It is the visible edge of something measured and confirmed. Most monitored glacier termini across Iceland retreated during the most recent glacier year, with researchers noting that a period of slower shrinkage appears to have ended, driven by warmer winters and one of the hottest summers on record. The ice that once fed these rivers in a steady, cold pulse through July and August is simply producing less later. And the rivers downstream are feeling every metre of that loss. What a healthy glacial meltwater river looks like at the height of summer is unmistakable. The water runs milky turquoise. That colour comes from glacial flour, fine mineral particles ground off the bedrock by the ice above and held in suspension. It is cold enough to ache your hand in seconds. Iceland's rivers fed by glacial meltwater produce exceptionally clean water with ideal temperatures for salmonids. And it is precisely that cold, mineral-rich current that the Arctic char has built its entire life around. Arctic char thrive in Iceland's glacial rivers and coastal waters, with some populations migrating to the sea before returning to spawn. In late summer, those returning fish need the river to be exactly what it always was: deep, cold, oxygenated, running hard over clean gravel. But that is not what they are finding. Arctic char require cold, oxygenated water, making them extremely sensitive to environmental conditions. The Arctic is warming 2 to 4 times faster than the global average, creating what researchers describe as a thermal squeeze for these cold water specialists. Warmer water holds less dissolved oxygen. A river that drops in volume and rises in temperature does both things at once, and it does it in August, the exact window when char and migratory salmon are pushing upstream to reach their spawning beds. Here is where the scale of this becomes almost surreal. The Eyjafjallajökull ice cap has shown a persistent area decrease and continuous volume loss over the past decade and more. That is an ice mass visible from space, a white plateau stretching across the horizon. And yet the consequence of its shrinking plays out on a gravel bed the size of a living room. A single spawning red, a shallow depression the char excavates in the riverbed, requires a precise depth of cold, fast-moving water to keep the eggs oxygenated through the winter. By late August in recent years, some of those reds are sitting exposed in open air, the river having retreated to a thin braid on the opposite bank. The fish that arrive to spawn have nowhere to go. The cascade does not stop with the fish. Follow the river further downstream, toward the lowland wetlands that fringe the south coast estuaries and river deltas, and you find the whooper swan, one of Iceland's most striking birds, white and enormous, arriving in spring to stage and feed on the shallow, productive wetlands that glacial hydrology has shaped over centuries. The pink-footed goose does the same, tens of thousands of them, using these coastal flats as a critical refueling stop on migration routes that span continents. Watch a skein of them come in low over the water at dusk, and it is genuinely breathtaking, the kind of spectacle that makes southern Iceland feel like the edge of the world in the best possible sense. But the wetland margins that sustain them are contracting as the glacial water budget that once kept them flooded through early summer delivers less reliably. The birds arrive on schedule. The landscape increasingly does not. What makes all of this quietly alarming rather than simply sad is the interlocking nature of it. The glacier retreats, the river shrinks and warms, the char struggles to spawn. The birds that depend on wetlands fed by that same hydrology find less to sustain them. Each link in that chain is its own story, but they are all the same. The glaciers are only part of what is changing. Further inland, on the moss-covered lava plains that stretch across the south coast and look as though nothing has disturbed them since the last eruption, something quieter and stranger is happening. The Arctic char's situation hit hard. If you had to pick the single, most vulnerable link in that chain, is it the fish, the birds, or the river itself? Drop your answer in the comments below. Because out on those lava plains, the moss is telling a completely different version of the same story. Stand on the south coast lava plains, the ones that stretch east from 𝐒𝐚𝐨𝐿𝐼 toward the black sand margins. And the first thing you notice is the silence of the moss. It grows in dense, continuous sheets across the cooled basalt, a landscape that looks impossibly soft from a distance and impossibly ancient up close. Some of these moss communities have been building themselves, millimetre by patient millimetre, for centuries. They are not fragile in the way a flower is fragile. They are fragile in the way a cathedral is fragile, structurally solid, but irreplaceable if lost, and slow beyond imagining to rebuild. Warmer, drier summers are stressing this moss. That much follows logically from everything the retreating glaciers have already told us. Less meltwater reaching the lowland plains means drier surface conditions across the lava fields through July and August, exactly the months when the moss needs moisture most. But the more counterintuitive threat is not the heat. It is purple, and it is beautiful, and it was planted here on purpose. And then there's the lupine. The Nootka lupine is native to North America and was introduced to Iceland in the 1940s as part of a reforestation and soil reclamation effort. Iceland's harsh climate, frequent volcanic activity, and overgrazing by livestock had left large parts of the land barren. And to combat soil erosion and improve fertility, lupines were planted because of their nitrogen-fixing ability. It worked. And then it kept working, past every boundary anyone had intended. The lupine is now advancing across the landscape far faster than originally intended, expanding into lava fields, grasslands, and protected areas, often outcompeting native vegetation. Here is what the lupine actually does to the ground beneath it. It pulls nitrogen from the air and deposits it into the soil. A process that sounds benign, even helpful, until you understand what that soil was before. The ancient moss and lichen community of the lava plains evolved in low nutrient conditions. That sparse chemistry is not a deficiency, it is the ecosystem. When the lupine enriches the soil, it does not improve the habitat for the moss. It replaces the habitat entirely, creating conditions that favour denser, faster-growing plants, which then shade out the moss, which then does not come back. Not in a decade, not in several. The human nature mirror here is almost too neat. In the 1940s, the concept of invasive species was unknown, and climate change was not a recognised issue. Lupines were actively sown across the country, including by aerial seeding, inadvertently kickstarting a spread far beyond anyone's intentions, believing it would remedy land degradation. The ecosystem is now carrying the weight of two decisions at once: the original planting and the warming climate that has extended the lupine's growing season and pushed its range into highland areas that were previously too cold to sustain it. One problem compounding the other, decades apart, arriving at the same moment. Off the south coast, just visible from the mainland on a clear day, the 𝐉𝐸⁻ Islands rise from the Atlantic in dark, volcanic columns. This is the largest Atlantic puffin colony on Earth, or it was. The puffins haven't flown away. They've stopped breeding successfully. Since the early 2000s, colonies here have experienced what amounts to breeding failure, with fewer adults breeding and only a scatter of chicks surviving to fledge. The cause traces directly to the sea surface. As the ocean gets warmer, the sand eel, the small, oil-rich fish that puffin chicks depend on through the critical weeks after hatching, is shifting its range northward to colder waters. The puffins arrive on schedule, as they have for generations. The caplin increasingly does not. Over the last 2 decades, the breeding population at 𝐉𝐸⁻ has declined by roughly 45%, a colony that once numbered among the largest seabird gatherings in the North Atlantic, now aging slowly toward silence. Iceland's ecosystems did not evolve in gentleness. They were built under volcanic eruption, glacial advance, and winters that last half the year. Resilience is written into this landscape at a fundamental level. The moss comes back after an ashfall. The rivers reroute after a flood. The birds return after a hard season. But resilience is not infinite. It operates within a speed limit. The moss does not grow back in a decade. The caplin does not simply return when the water is convenient. The puffin colony cannot recruit a new generation it never produced. What is happening across southern Iceland is not a single catastrophe. It is a pace problem. The land can absorb change. What it cannot absorb is change arriving faster than any adaptation can answer it. Stand again on that black sand coast and look north. The glaciers of 𝐒𝐻𝐿 are still there on the horizon, still vast, still white, but they are smaller than they were when we started watching, and everything downstream is already living with what that means. Subscribe for more on how the world's most extraordinary landscapes are being reshaped by forces we can now measure.